Good evening, students. This is the very last of these videos that I make on late on a Thursday night. I thought actually it would be earlier tonight since I wasn't really responding to too much of your of your comments, although I did some of that as well. But I started writing out my thoughts on the course, and it turns out that I had quite a few. So I'm going to share them with you, and I'm going to post the written notes as well from what I'm talking about. And certainly you can either watch this or read it or not. There's certainly no requirement anymore. The course is completed. I hope most of you have been able to finish your papers or are almost finished with them. But in this video, I would like to sort of sum up and reflect a little bit on the course. I'm looking forward to receiving your course evaluations and getting your thoughts on this experience. And I've asked some questions actually that I wouldn't mind your responding to, even in this discussion post that I'm posting now. As I say, this website will be live for several months in the future, and I hope we'll be able to continue some of these conversations. So I've got about 5 or 6 kinds of comments to make. This might be a little longer. I thought it was going to be a real short video, but might not be so short. We'll see. So my own sense of the course is as follows. 1, and perhaps the most important, I think you, the students, have been an extraordinary group of students who seem to be able to engage this material from the very beginning. Medieval Jewish philosophy and Maimonides himself is not generally viewed as such a attractive, compelling, sexy kind of material to open up with students and to teach. But you seem to get into it very early. You all participated in the discussion threads and the discussion between and among you. All that discussion was serious, respectful, insightful, and generally at a very high level. You anticipated issues and challenges in your postings which would arise later in the readings. You also anticipated a number of scholarly issues and problems and raised them without the benefit of reading the secondary literature. You also came up with interesting and insightful comments on traditional problems in the guide, which anticipated what the scholarly literature argued. Second, I think that the plan of the course basically worked. This was experimental for me. I really didn't know how this would go. Never done this kind of course online on the internet, although I've taught other kinds of courses. And I think that the plan worked, partly because you made it possible for it to work. Part of the goal was simply to give you the experience of reading large chunks of text written by Maimonides. I think it would be interesting for you all to go back to the course description and the introduction to the course to see how and if it did what it set out to do. It was instructive for me to look again at the course description as well. In classroom-based courses, I often bring copies of that initial course description to the last class to reflect on what happened and what was supposed to happen. So in the end, you did read lots of texts from Maimonides, and I think that you all saw that although some of these texts were not easy, they were all doable, and you were able to understand them. You don't need either abridged versions or watered-down versions. There is something exhilarating in looking at a classical, what people think is a difficult text, that might have seemed quite formidable. You say, oh, I'm taking a course in Maimonides. Oh, my goodness. But in fact, you successfully made your way through it. And I'm both proud of you and proud of me that you did it. The strategy of the course was to begin with some early writings, which were not written in too confusing a style, and then move on to the more complicated ones, and then return towards the end to the more easily intelligible ones that had other kinds of problems associated with them. I believe that you were all prepared to read the guide and understand it as much as we can when we got to it. We didn't invest too much in this course in secondary materials, and I don't really regret it, except that I would like to provide you some strategies for your ongoing study of Maimonides in the future, which I hope you will do. You did become familiar a little with some of the major figures who write about Maimonides: Herbert Davidson, Leo Strauss, Howard Kreisel, Ralph Lerner, and of course Isidore Tversky. That's really not too bad. Philosophical issues. From the beginning, we engaged in theological and philosophical discourse, as well as halachic and moral discourse. From my perspective, we were able to engage in philosophical discussions at a pretty high level. I never felt that I had to be wary of raising difficult or complex theological issues. I tried to walk a thin line between being an authentic interpreter of Maimonides and helping you do that, and at the same time focusing on the ongoing theological and philosophical issues which Maimonides touches on and which still challenge the contemporary Jewish philosopher and theologian. We talked about generous reading. We talked about all of those issues which Maimonides raises have not been solved. As far as I'm concerned, none of them have been solved. And so they still engage us. Whether Maimonides' answers are, even in a generous reading, are appropriate or not is something we could talk about. I found in the teaching of the course that Maimonides, for me, was both more relevant and less relevant. I found certain things in this latest reading of Maimonides this semester, with your help, that I found quite extraordinary and very moving and timely. I also found other things in his writings which were disturbing in different ways than I had thought about them before. You all opened new vistas for me. Chevruta, our Chevruta. I found the Chevruta sessions interesting, helpful, and sometimes exhausting and sometimes exhilarating. The ones that were supposed to focus on Hebrew didn't really work out for that purpose, although they were fine as text discussions. In the future, we'll have to rethink that. For the most part, these Chevruta sessions didn't really operate as Chevruta sessions, but rather as discussion sessions, since I tended to act like a teacher instead of a listener and a participant. And we'll have to see. I want to hear from your comments what you felt about them. I found them helpful and stimulating, but I think for next time, I would probably want them to be a bit more structured. I'm not sure if this course, Readings of Maimonides, ought to have a Hebrew option, since there's only one set of books, the Mishnah Torah by Rambam, which was written in Hebrew. I would be interested in your thoughts on these sessions. For me, they offered an amazing opportunity to get to know all of you, which rarely happens in an online course. Unfortunately, it wasn't all of you that I got to work with. There was one Chevruta that I was not able to meet with for technical reasons. I would be interested actually in hearing how that Chevruta went and what your experience was. Maybe it's better if I don't come. You have much more bonding and connection, maybe learn from each other. I also wonder if it might be useful to switch Chevruta partners at least once during the semester to get everybody a different taste of what that might mean. Papers. I have mixed feelings about the assigning of papers and about what kinds of papers they should be. Unlike in campus-based courses, I have a pretty good sense of what you are doing and how you are understanding the materials from your postings. On the other hand, I've also found that I do get new information when you hand in papers, short or long. Should there be more shorter papers? Should we have other means to evaluate how people are doing and how they're understanding? It does change when you have to really create a whole argument about something, my sense of what you're learning. Finally, I would like to invite you to continue the discussion. This work of philosophy and engagement in theological discourse is an ongoing one, and it's an ongoing one at Hebrew College. I'm always open to talking with you and corresponding with regard to any of the issues that we discussed and ones we didn't discuss. I'm leaving the Schoology, our Schoology website live for at least a few months. If any of you want to continue the conversation there, either by discussing the Spinoza material or anything else. Ultimately, we are all here to learn, me as well as you. That's really it's what my teaching is about. In a sense, my life is about just continued learning and continued learning from other people as well as from myself and in myself, and from reading and studying texts and all of this. So ultimately, we are all here to learn, and I look forward to continuing to learn with you. Laila Tov.